Hi there, my name is Kimberly Inez Mays, and I have a question to ask you. What does your business ecosystem look like? And if you're like, what the heck is an ecosystem? Well, stay tuned and I'm going to tell you. So, for those who don't know me, my name is Kimberly Inez Mays, and I demystify technology for small and medium sized service based businesses so that they can stop duct taping their systems together and start scaling with confidence. And I know I talk a lot about AI as of late, but AI is only one layer of it. And I think that a lot of people are now starting to realize that AI is a shiny object. And don't get me wrong, I am passionate about AI and I'm not going to stop talking about it because I am curious, number one, and I'm a technologist, number two. And if you can hear my cat purring in the mic, I apologize. But number three is I just like to look at things as puzzle pieces, and that's just one piece of the puzzle, AI. But what about all the other puzzle pieces that you might be overlooking? Well, I put together an AI systems and scorecard quiz because I really want you to think of AI as just one piece of your ecosystem, but there are so many other pieces of it. There's the piece of your systems, for example, like your CRMs, anything that you use for calendaring, anything that you use for project management, anything that you use for fulfillment. And then there is your data. Data is so important and data is overlooked. And it's actually quite sad because a lot of my content that has to do with data is actually the content that performs the worst. But without great data, you can't make good decisions. Without great data, your CRM is going to be a mess. You can't analyze properly, and it's just really hard to come back from bad data. I worked in data marketing for, 14 years, 15 years, and I know the value of clean data. And yes, AI can clean your data, but it's best not to have messy data in the first place. So we talked about systems, AI, data, but here's another part of it too is teamwork, your SOPs, your processes, like what to do if you want to hire, whether it is you hiring a VA versus you growing and scaling your team of people that you already employ. How are you documenting things? How are you assigning roles and responsibilities? How are you managing turnover and handover? And how are you getting buy-in and getting temperature checks on the processes and tools that you're already using? And then the fifth one is automation. So what are the things that you're doing repeatedly that can be automated? Are you seeing gains in those areas? Are you seeing results, or are you just dabbling with new tools that you don't need to be dabbling with? And the reason why this is so timely is because these are now my 5 pillars by which I'm going to talk about a lot of things that I think small, medium-sized businesses should really pay attention to, because it's not only about AI, and it's not only about, oh, should I use high level, or should I use HubSpot, or should I use CapCut, or whatever. It's about, are all 5 of these things playing in harmony so that your business can be harmonized? And also, the reason why I talk about it is because I know that there is a lot being sold to people, a lot of things being sold to people, especially software. Right now, with the whole vibe coding, which I'm going to talk more about vibe coding, there's going to be so much more software that's available to use, and not even about vibe coding, but just white labeling. That's another big one. And then the barrier to entry of these software solutions is so much lower that now you can buy in and invest in literally anything. I used to have an AppSumo addiction, just as a side note. I no longer do, but that's the thing. When you buy into too much that you don't need because it looks great, you're not actually using it to its fullest potential. And then also, it doesn't play nicely within those other 5 areas. So, how do you discern what tool you should use? Well, before I talk about it, I'll talk about the fact that most things will work, right? I mean, I think most platforms more or less will do the same thing. When I talk about CRMs, for example, when I talk about email marketing, calendaring, when I talk about invoices or proposals and things like that, like I've seen too much to be impressed really by anything. I will see a new tool that comes out or see somebody using something and I'm like, okay, that's nice, especially with learning management systems. Don't even get me started on that. That's a totally different tool. But what I will say is most of the tools will do roughly about 80% of the same things. It's that 20% differentiator between some features that might win you over others. But why I say that is that there's no one size fits all solution for every single person. And if you are buying into a tool because your coach uses it or your mentor uses it or you've seen it or like this big guru is promoting it, understand that it took them a while to get there. Number one, because they had the blueprint laid out and that's what works for their business. And number two, there's a thing called affiliate marketing where if you sign up, they get a little bit of cash back. So you also want to be mindful of that too. And so what to do when you have all of these platforms and things being thrown at you, plus you're trying to run a business, plus you're trying to scale it or maybe even get it started. Well, I always say just go back to a sheet of paper, right? And it's so simple, but a lot of it's not sexy to talk about. It's not sexy to talk about writing things down. And I'm just going to take a look at my notes just to make sure that I didn't forget anything that I was going to say. So yeah, don't be overwhelmed by best practices and guru playbooks. That's what I'm saying is like think about how people become aware of your business. Who are you trying to target? What problem are you solving? Get really, 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 really clear on that before you go and invest in this thing or that thing, because whatever you invest in, you can make it work for you. But if it's not working, it's probably because you skipped steps, right? So your ecosystem is really a combination of tools and processes and strategies that sustain the growth, as I talked about too. Like, for example, if you have a project management tool, but you're not using it, half your team hates it, your clients don't know how to use it, for example. I've had a couple of tools that I had to pivot and modify and do additional education so they know how to use a tool. That's just one thing, right? Just buying a piece of software is not going to work. You have to get buy-in. You have to make sure that you're putting the right processes in it. So that is really your entire ecosystem. So copy and paste solutions really ignore your actual market team and your operations. So let's talk about, let me see, let me just go through my notes. So let's talk about how the five could be in harmony, right? So I talked about automation. I talked about AI. And I really should come up with an acronym for this because sometimes it's hard, like just going off of memory. I will come up with a word for it. Your data, your systems, and there's another one too. Your data, your systems, automation, AI, and I am forgetting one more. It'll come back to me. I know. It's all in the scorecard quiz. So what the scorecard quiz does, it tests you in the 5 areas. And then what it does, it gives you a recommendation. So what does that harmonization look like? First, I say start off with your data. What are you collecting on people? What information do you need from them to get them into your funnel? Normally, it's the name and email address. Okay, then what else do you need from them? You need, behavioral data. You need what did they click on? What did they reply to? What's getting the most response? What's not? What fields are you going to use in your CRM? How are you going to tag people? How are you going to tag your different types of leads? How are you going to tag your different types of clients? How are you going to make sure you know who is who and who is where? And I'll talk more about that probably in another video. But how do you discern that? And then how do you know when it's right to automate? For example, if you have invoices that you send out every month for a recurring service or product, can you automate that? Can you automate when a card is declined? Can you automate the follow-up? Can you automate the messaging, letting people know that the invoice is going to come due? How do you handle for the error cases or just error handling? And there are a lot of tools that do that well, and there's some tools that do that just okay. But what is it that really matters to you? Because at the end of the day, if that's something that does not matter to you, maybe you don't need a tool that does that very, very well. So we talked about AI, we talked about well, we talked about data, we talked about automation, and then we're going to talk about like teamwork and systems. So your teamwork and your well, we're going to talk about your teamwork and your systems, right? That's two different things, but let's talk about your team, for example. How are you going to get new talent for your business? Who are you looking for? What roles do they need to be proficient at? What roles are nice to have? Um, do you need a generalist? And when I say generalist, this is a person, typically a VA, who is good at doing a bunch of things, but maybe doing them at maybe 70% of capacity, versus a specialist who that's all they do, but they do it at like 120% awesomeness, right? And you need to understand, and you need to have expectations, and you need to have realistic expectations of what your team can do. And if you're bringing together a bunch of people who do different roles, do they know where their role stops and starts and where another role begins? How do those roles work together? How do they know where to go for help? And do they even know what the mission of your business is? Are they bought into it, or is it just another freelance job? So I talk a lot about that. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more because I think that is so important when you're looking to scale with your team. And then lastly, the systems, right? The systems, I think, the technology, I think, is really last. And when I say systems, I don't only mean technology, but in this case, I'm going to talk about technology. The technology can change, it can pivot over time. And a lot of people say, well, invest in the platform that's going to grow with you now. And I don't disagree with that. But I do think that you need to invest in a thing that you're going to actually use now, and not just a someday kind of thing. So if you're just buying something for someday, then I prefer that you invest in something that you can use now and get great results in. All right. So that's really all I got to say about that. But that was just a general cornerstone type of message that I wanted to get out there, is that yes, I will be covering more of these 5 things, and I will be having discussions with other people, so you don't just have to look and listen to my talking head, but you can actually hear it from other people, what they may be doing, and not copy them, but to get inspired by them so that you can use some of the strategies that they're using, and then most importantly, create your own. All right. So that is it. That is the end. And before I let you go, I want you, or I encourage you, to take the AI Systems and Scorecard quiz. It's just 5 simple questions just to give you some resources in these 5 different areas in your business. I have templates and tools and suggestions that you can either take or don't take, and you can see my process of how I lay everything out. And hopefully it is something that well, not hopefully, but I know it is something that you'll find valuable. So, okay. So until next time, take care, be well, and I'll speak to you later. Bye.